Good morning, SFL people. What is going on? This is your host, Chad Rowan. Welcome to the podcast version of the Streets Are Talking. And it is, I'll tell you the exact time, it's 6:15. It is 11:51 in the morning. And we got a lot to talk about, right? So let me get into how this is working for today. Obviously, probably next week we will be back live. But this week was just kind of too good to just skip out. So as I explained in the server, and first off, if you're not in the Streets of Talking server, why, right? Why are we still not in there? If you're listening to this and you haven't, find me, find the link. There's all kinds of links in there in the show, like lead content, right? And so join that server, right? There's a lot of great conversations going on in there. So please join that if you haven't. But in the Streets of Talking server, I did mention that because of Eddie's schedule and my schedule. So Eddie's schedule has been booked all the way up to tonight. And then my schedule was open that whole time. And then today, after work today, my schedule will be booked. Basically, I'm out of town the entire weekend through Father's Day. So I'll be gone. So instead of trying to put something out for next week, and a lot of people will be disappointed and not hearing, any sort of reactions to anything. And this is a big week, right? As I felt, this is a huge week. Eddie and I talked about it, and I said, hey, look, I'm thinking about doing a recording thing or deal. Eddie was good with it. I think he's actually going to do a Say It With Your Chest tonight. So I am probably sure he'll probably mention some stuff on there. But I at least wanted to get some content out for y'all, right? That way you guys had it. So what this is going to do is it's going to be a recorded version of it. There's going to be no video. Going to be nothing. I thought about doing video, but decided not to. And this was actually the original idea of the show, which is wild. I was going to do a podcast similar to this and just kind of talk to y'all. But Eddie and I teamed up together, and I think we've really got something special cooking. But this week, like I said, with schedules and everything, it's just not going to be able to work out to do a live show. So I wanted to bring it here to you guys. So what we're going to talk about today is nothing but free agency, right? Reactions. There's a few shockers, right? We're going to be talking about what teams stood out. We're going to be talking about what teams didn't do enough. And then from there, I'm going to give you 4 winners and 4 losers of the free agency market. Now, like I said, me and Eddie have not talked about anything, right? We've done little DMs and text messages here and there about things, but nothing where it's like, okay, I need to know what you're saying. I need to know what you're saying. I didn't put any questions out for the streets because, the streets have been talking enough. I can kind of gather up from whatever else. And usually we like to have the streets stuff live and actually posted. So we're not going to do that. So let's just jump right into it, right? Let's talk about the surprise pickups in this free agency, right? And none, I think, more surprising, at least, maybe not so surprising, is the fact that the Canton Classics were able to go out and get their quarterback in Scar Patterson, right? Scar Patterson coming over from San Diego in the past season. This is a team that really needed a jolt. This is a team that was pretty much dead last in scoring in this past season, basically averaging maybe around 13 points a game, maybe a little bit more than that. They needed something, right? You had Cam Curtis in there. He was a decent build, but he just wasn't what they needed. They needed some sort of spark, right? You're able to have a running back like Robert Johnson, but when you have decent wide receivers that they had, you got to have somebody that can throw the ball, right? And we all know that Scar Patterson from his San Diego days can definitely chuck the rock, right? Just over $2 million. I believe he's the highest paid quarterback in the entire SFL. All of his attributes stay: 90 pass strength, 90 accuracy, and 89 composure, 90 consistency, 90 recoverage. this guy's fully maxed out. Got some good speed on him. They may be able to use him in the run game a little bit. Who knows? But this is a guy staying at 6'4", 233. He's going to be a beast, right? And I think in the right offense, in the right situation, I think this is something that Chris Porter can play with, right? The offensive coordinator for Canton. Looking at other signings, they were able to bring in Ryan Owens, a former Arizona Scorpion, I believe. So bringing in a guy like him that could be your number one, let's see what happens, right? He's been in that offense where, Ashley Jackson was able to throw the ball to him and this and that. And he comes over now as the number one. They still keep Twin Screw and Al Dillipre Sr. at 2 and 3. and then they only got Jack Wall there. So I think, if Canton's not already full, they're going to be looking into that draft, going for somebody else that could be maybe a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, even maybe even a tight end too, because Jack Wall can't be the only tight end on that team, right? But with Robert Johnson and moving Kane Hunter over to halfback as well, so they got a 2-back system going on. This could be maybe a power run team, but then again, if you're going to spend $2 million on Scar Patterson, you're going to be chucking the ball, right? And so I think in this situation, they definitely, I would love to see them go out and get another wide receiver. I would have loved to see them get somebody maybe like a Vin Calia, for example, from London, or a Fox Highwind from London, but didn't work in the cards for him. Ryan Owens, hopefully he'll be what they need to have. Another really interesting signing that maybe nobody talks about is the new number 1 wide receiver in Carolina, Riley Quintero. Right, Riley Quintero was a guy that was really highly coveted coming out of the SFLM back a few seasons ago. Now was in Denver, has been in Denver the entire time. Now he tests free agency, comes over, gets that bag, $1.525 million signing, right? Fully maxed out speed, well, not fully maxed out, but 92 speed, 92 agility. I mean, this guy's got some great run around, great catch. I mean, he's a very all-around receiver. Could be somebody that comes in and does some kick returns as well. My only concern about Riley Quintero being a number 1 wide receiver right now is the fact that he's only 5'11", 200 pounds. I mean, you got some physical corners in this league, right? 6'3", 6'4" corners that would be able to tower over a guy like Riley Quintero. But as we all know, with the new system and the new game and everything else, you're going to be able to have that guy maybe be in the slot more often, maybe move him into the outside, maybe move him to the inside, maybe put him in the backfield, do some different things, kind of be a 5-way tool, as you want to call it, right? Or there's a different, like a Swiss Army knife sort of thing. But this is a guy that I think in the system that they have, and with the offensive coordinator there as well, they're going to be able to really utilize his talents and make a really interesting player out of him. So it's a really good signing, and obviously bringing back, your quarterback Matt South helps as well. Chase Earl bumps down to 2, Harish Prasad stays at 3. So this is a really good wide receiver room when you're looking at the Carolina Skyhawks. Moving on to the team that's in their division as well, the Charleston Predators, right? Charleston, they came out, they were really excited about who they were able to bring in. They pretty much have a full offensive line now, if I remember correctly, but the one guy that I was really looking at was John Lakeman. You go from Kentez Johnson, who was a decent quarterback, right? I mean, he had some good build stats, right? He was a good build, a decent build. And then you go to John Lakeman. Right, John Lakeman's a guy that was drafted by Queen City. He was the starting quarterback at Queen City, was looked at to be maybe the future of Queen City, right? Was very famous in the SFLM for being the Lakeman Shuffle, right? For a guy that has 52 speed, I doubt he's going to be doing the Lakeman Shuffle, but he's got some decent stats, right? He's got 90 pass strength, 90 accuracy, 90 read coverage. They paid him $1.348 million. So, I mean, he's getting a decent little bag here coming over to Charleston. But the one question I have about John Lakeman, obviously, rookie season, they go 0-12. They looked bad, right? I mean, John had some decent games, don't get me wrong. But he just didn't look too good in some situations. So with the composure that he has, is he going to be able to build that composure up and be able to stay in the pocket and take some of the physical hits that these SFL pros can lay out? We're not really too sure. I mean, he's 6'5", he's 230. He's a big guy, right? He should be able to take a little bit of punishment, but we will see. And then obviously with what they have done, they were able to bring in Benjamin Warner, who comes over, I believe, from Portland this past season. They paid him a lot of money, $1.7 million as a wide receiver. That's got to be one of the top 5, maybe top 7 contracts for wide receiver in the entire SFL. I mean, I know Ryan Roosevelt's only a 1.4, and he was the top wide receiver last year in the SFL. So Benjamin Warner, interesting, coming over from Portland as well. With $1.7 million. And then obviously, getting a backup tight end in Lion Trees, who's basically, was bagging groceries at the local Safeway. But Safeway. But yeah, so with all of that, could be interesting, right? But like I said, you have a full offensive line. Should be, we'll see exactly how that plays out. But Charleston's doing some interesting things. They're doing some interesting things here. One of the things I really like about this as well is, J.W. Hartshorn, which is something we'll discuss here later on. J.W. Hartshorn coming over from Houston this past season. So we'll talk about that later on. Another combination, which if you guys know me well enough, I don't like talking about this, right? You know that I don't like bringing this team up because of the fact that, they're my rival. They're one of the biggest rivals. We have the best rivalry in the SFL. I mean, nobody else is touching us, right? The Corbin Cup and Vice Wars and whatever else, the Golden Dog Leg or Bone, whatever it's called. They don't touch what the Ramblers versus the Legend have, but I have to bring up Minnesota in a situation if we're going to be talking about picks, right? And obviously, one of the knocks that some people, mainly me, has had in the time that Minnesota has had a team is the fact that their offense seems to kind of sputter, right? They have some games where they come out really solid, and then they have some games where they come out and just lay it flat, right? You can't say that anymore about how this offense is built, right? I mean, Johnny Reno getting paid $1.39 million. Then they go out and not only get one number one wide receiver, but they get two number one wide receivers. And then Callahan from London and Deezer Powell coming over from Queen City. Deezer Powell was a guy that's been at Queen City, I believe, since I was in the league and back in season 13. So to see him move on tells you something about the Queen City Corsairs. But then Callahan coming in $1.578 million bag. Deezer Powell coming in at $1.324 million. Jay Taylor, who was there last year in Minnesota, 1.2, and then Queg Mam coming in just under $1 million. I mean, this wide receiver core has been paid, right? Been paid. So, seeing Callahan and Powell coming in here together, there's going to be a lot of problems, especially for defenses, right? We get to play them twice a year, and when I was putting in the roster in my retro the other night, I was like, oh man, like this is a little rough. They did a great job. Got to give props to Stephen Black, first year GM. I know that BJ probably had a lot to do with this as well, but I mean, got to give credit, right? I mean, and then on top of that, we haven't even talked about this, is on top of that, you have Jay Hayden, right, who originally was drafted as a tight end. He was drafted by the Baltimore Vultures back in season 14-15 draft. I believe it was season 15. Moves over to wide receiver, goes from bounces from Queen City to Charleston, Arizona, I believe, at one point. And now you're coming back and you're going into Minnesota, being the second tight end behind Jason France, who's already a good tight end. So this offense is going to be scary good, right? And in a division that, you had a playoff team last year, or you actually had three playoff teams last year in that division, and then you got a team that hasn't signed a damn soul yet, which we'll get to later. They went out and did what they had to do, right? They definitely went out and did what they had to do. Defensively, they were already pretty set anyway. Axel Raven moving over to strong safety, that's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if that pays off for them. But, I mean, obviously they were able to get Miles Gibson coming over from a division rival, if I remember correctly, in Tulsa, coming over at just over $1 million. This is a well put together team, and I hate to say it, I really do. It kind of makes me want to vomit when I think about it, but they've done a terrific job. Got to give them credit. Have to give Minnesota credit for what they've done. And then last but not least, and this has all been positive stuff, right? As you've already heard, that everything has been positive. Let's talk about the negative. I need you guys to listen to me for a minute. I need you to listen, right? Let's just put our thinking caps on. Get out our notepads if we need to take notes. What the hell is Portland doing? I mean, they haven't done much, right? Like if you're looking at the contracts here for Portland, I mean, they've only signed 2 free agents. Both of them are a wide receiver. But that's not even. That's Michael Knight came over from Sioux Falls. I don't mind that move, right? It's a decent signing. You're bringing him in at number 2. But Scott Johnson, a running back, coming over to play wide receiver, I mean, could you not find any? Right? Like what happened here? Right? I mean, he has to be friends with somebody. That's the only thing that can make sense, right? You're looking at this build. He's 5'11", 215, right? So in the slot, not bad, right? Not a bad thing. He's got good speed, right? He can break some tackles. He can hold on to the ball. He's got to have a little bit of aggressiveness, right? He's got some low to mid range hops, probably low more than anything. and then you look at, there's two things that wide receivers have to do, right? You have to be able to run your routes, and you have to be able to catch the ball. Run route is a 49, and his catch is a 55 out of 98. Out of 98, guys. Listen, think about that. This is a guy that you're trusting to, at least when you're looking at the roster up and down, unless you're just going to play him in certain situations, or you're going to use him as a slot reverse type of guy, right? I mean, I can see this coaching staff really trying to put together like, okay, we're going to do some trick plays. We're going to put Scott Johnson here in like a wildcat type of situation and let him go. Because if you're, 3rd and 9 and you're looking to get it first down, I don't trust this guy as far as I can throw him to be able to catch the ball, right? That's the problem, right? And especially in a time where when you have progression system that is really based on like the league average, and so when you look at all wide receivers, everybody's at like 90, darn good and well it's going to cause an arm and a leg and another toe to be able to get his catch way up there, and it's going to cost multiple seasons. So for a team to do that, when you know that you could go into the draft and get you a good wide receiver and probably cheaper maybe, or even the same price, I don't like the move. I don't like the move at all. I think it's a terrible move. You haven't signed Ezekiel Love yet. Are you just waiting on everybody else to kind of sign and see where your cap is and then to know what you pay Love? I mean, let's just face it, right? This offense really flows around Ezekiel Love, right? Let's call it like it is. But I mean, is it really like, is this what you're going to do? Right? You're looking at this build. I mean, your defense is pretty much set. I mean, you need some defensive ends, right? You only got 2 down linemen. You got 3 linebackers. You got 3 corners. You got a free safety, strong safety. So you're good there in the back end of your defense. You're fine. And you're well paid on the back end of your defense, right? Every person in the back half of your defense, linebackers and safeties and corners included, everybody's over $1 million except for one, which is Joseph Lama. So you go ahead and switch out a running back for a wide receiver in a situation where that just doesn't work with these builds. So don't know who the brainwave was behind that operation, but man, I mean, hopefully it'll work out for them. Maybe they got some trickery up their sleeve when it comes to how they're going to use them. But if you're just using him solely as a wide receiver and you're wanting him to catch the ball, terrible move. It's a terrible move. So those were the surprise pickups, right? Those were the ones that were like, okay, like those were good, right? And there's some other pickups along the way. We could have spent an hour talking about and breaking down why they picked this person up, at least my feelings on it. But we're not going to do that, right? So what we want to do is we want to move on. And so what I'm looking at is teams that really stood out, maybe in a good way, maybe in a bad way. And I may ruffle some feathers for what I'm about to say, and I'm fine with that. I've ruffled too many feathers in my past anyway. Might as well do it, right? Why not? So the first team I want to talk about is, I'm going to quickly touch on Minnesota again, right? I don't think we really have to go into any more of this. I had Minnesota written down as a team, and then I forgot how much I was going to go into the pickups. Went a little bit too much, so we'll just quickly touch. This is a team I really like what they've done. Right, they've done a terrific job this offseason in looking to probably improve even more in the draft. So a team that we have not talked about, which stood out to me a little bit for maybe different reasons, is the Jacksonville Kings. Right, the Kings really came into this offseason with a lot of questions. They lost a pretty decent amount They really, and I got to give Frank and them credit, right? You know, when the re-signings happened, you know, you were like, oh man, like this is rough, right? Like this team is not going to be able to be put together, especially in this kind of time frame. They went out and got like 10 players, like 9 or 10 players. So let's talk about that real quick, right? So I think one of the first ones that came across, you know, when you're looking at this team, you know, Sean Sanders is a guy that's paid over $2 million, right? So when you're looking at the Kings, you got to look, okay, we need some blocking, right? And they went out and got Jay Ballmer from DC, right? Jay Ballmer, for all it's worth, he's always in the chat talking about Texas this and Texas that. And you just assumed it was just like a ploy. Maybe he was going to go to Fort Worth or something, or like, you know, Mexico City or whatever. No, they're not even in Texas, so it doesn't even matter about Mexico City. Um, but this was an interesting signing, right? Just over $1 million. You know, he's a good blocker, right? He's got some good run block. Maybe he needs a little bit better on the pass blocking end of things, but run blocking for the most part looks pretty good. Can catch. I mean, he's really kind of a guy that's not really a traditional fullback, right? He's more of that, you know, Terrell Sutherland type where you see him out in the open in the flats and doing this and doing that, catching the ball and trying to make them miss. You know, so an interesting signing for them right there. And then they really just had to rebuild their top guys into the wide receiver end, right? David Gears coming over at 1.35. You know, Connor Weston, a wide receiver as well, coming over at 1.31. So those were interesting pickups, right? The really ones that kind of stood out to me was tight end. You know, Talon Steele went to London this past season, coming back over to Jacksonville, you know, coming back over at $1.6 million. And then Jim Copeland Jr., right? Jim Copeland Jr. was somebody that retired. I think he's retired like 5 times, but he retired. And then now he's back as a backup tight end at 1.3. So interesting signings here when you're looking at this, right? I mean, when you look at Talon Steele, 6'7", 263, really did a decent job in that London offense this past season, getting him into a division title, getting him into the playoffs. But when you're looking at this, I mean, 85 catch. I mean, he can't pass block worth a darn, but that's fine. 75 run block, right? Pretty aggressive, pretty consistent. Got some decent speed. You look at Jim Copeland Jr., I mean, he's a little bit better of a pass blocker, obviously, but this is almost kind of the exact same build. So, you know, what this tells me is that Jacksonville is really going to be looking at either, you know, trying to have those tight ends be good blockers. You know, they're going to be really a 2 tight end system, right? And if you know anything about this game that we've seen so far, I mean, tight ends have been very well utilized in these games that the league has ran, and then sims that I've done and sims that other people have talked to me about. So, you know, maybe they took that idea and ran with it, right, and got some good tight ends. So we'll see how that works out for them. But, you know, the interesting part is Tigger Clay coming over from Minnesota, too. Tigger Clay, $1.348 million strong safety. He's going to get an opportunity to start. So kudos to him on that. But just an all-around strong safety, still working on his build. But like I said, I mean, the interesting part is that this roster is not full, right? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So they have, you know, 3 more players to get to plus your draft picks. So are they going to be able to get to that 23? Are they going to have enough on the roster? Because right now they're $23.6 million total in cap. So that means you got $1.4 million left over. So it's going to be interesting to see. They may have to do a little bit of restructuring to get some of these guys in, but we'll see how that all plays out. Another team that really stood out to me as well, and they really didn't do a whole lot, right? But they did just enough. And maybe they stand out for a different reason, is Louisiana. You know, Louisiana coming in, they needed a wide receiver. They were able to go get Adam Banks for $982,000, right? Gary Burney and Gary Clem coming over from Canton, if I remember correctly, just over $1 million for each of them. So, but what this team has done, though, I mean, the interesting thing is going to be they've made all kinds of trades, right? And that's what's really stood out to me. And when you look at this roster, I mean, the number one need has got to be a running back, right? Is this maybe where Chris Grant Jr. goes? Chris Grant Jr. has really stood out in the SFLM this season. Ben Jackson has stood out in the SFLM as well. Those are two guys that as a broadcaster, I call SFLM games. And so to see those two guys and maybe be the possibility here in Louisiana, that could be interesting, right? Do they go with a two-back system, right? They've been making a lot of moves to get, second round and first round draft picks. I mean, they have a full roster. So what's the plan here, gentlemen, right? I'm really itching to see where they go. I mean, you still got Cameron Collier in there as your lead fullback, right? 1.1 million. Liam Hammer's there at 1.7 million for wide receiver. John Michael Sudduth and Levy Lease is there, at tight end position. They were able to get Odette Boudreaux to convert over to guard again. Ross Napoli is there as well as on the offensive line. So their defense is well stacked. They've done a really good job on the defensive side of the ball. But now you got to focus on the offense, right? 4 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. I think they probably go with a two-back system. Maybe they bring that back. Not 100% sure. They had Square Bush, who was a power back, has been a power back for quite a while, but maybe they focus a little bit on the finesse, right? That's where I see maybe a Chris Grant Jr. type of player coming in there, right? But then again, like I said, Ben Jackson has looked very, very good in this SFLM season. So maybe that's where they go. Maybe they both end up there. Maybe Louisiana makes some big old trades. Who knows, right? But we'll have to see. We'll have to find out here probably in July. I assume it is. I think it's in July. So with teams that really stood out, and what teams done a great job. We obviously have to talk about the teams that didn't do anything or didn't do enough, right? So one of the teams that, in my mind, did not really do enough, I think, and maybe it's by design, is the Houston Headhunters. Obviously with the way that they've built this up, right? You lose quite a bit on defense, right? You lose Butch Minner. You lose Corey Minner. You lose J.W. Hartshorn. I mean, your back end of your defense is interesting. So what do you do as the man who runs the show, right? What do you do? I don't know who the GM is there anymore. I think it's Tom Tanner. What do you do as the man who runs the show? You go out and get a 4th wide receiver in Goldie Morrison. Why? Right? Like just why? I mean, I get what they're trying to do, right? I think I would assume they were probably in on the Van Calia sweepstakes. Probably didn't win out that way, so they had to kind of change direction a little bit. They wanted to get a 4th wide receiver. But $350,000 for a 4th wide receiver. And when you bring this up, I mean, he's not that fast. He's only an 81, right? He's not that fast. He's got some decent catch. He's got some decent run route. His stamina needs to be built up a little bit. He needs to get stronger. That's for sure, right? When you're going up against these SFL, corners, they're strong. I mean, they're very strong, right? And Goldie's a little bit on the weak side. So could be something he needs to be building on. He needs to build his consistency as well. 5'11", 210. I don't mind the height. I don't mind the weight. But that's just an interesting move, right? And then the one I actually did like was bringing back the man, the myth, the legend, Tiberius Bovine, Hall of Famer, making him a tight end again, right? The fullback thing with London just was not working, right? He obviously ends up going to Queen City as well. But they started the Bovine to fullback project, and it just wasn't it, right? When you think Tiberius Bovine, I think getting kicked out of weddings at a convention and tight end, right? And so that's a long story. If anybody wants to know, I'm sure that somebody will tell what the heck is Chad talking about kicking out of a wedding. So Tiberius Bovine coming in, he's got some decent speed. He's a good blocker, right? He can run routes very well. He's got to get his catch up a little bit, right? Obviously, being a fullback, he probably has to remember some things. But this is a guy that's a Hall of Famer. It's like riding a bike. He'll be able to be fine with it, But going back to why I think they should have done a little bit more is you have 1 corner and 2 safeties. That's it, right? You had a great corner in J.W. Hartshorn, somebody that you probably could have made that a building piece for future players to come in, and you just let them walk for a bag of cookies, right? You let them walk for nothing. Um, you know, it's interesting to see what teams do, right? When you know that you have holes to fill, and what you do is you go with a totally different direction of just like, okay, look, my defense on the back end is a little rough, especially when you see teams like that they're going to face, right? Minnesota has got a hell of a wide receiver core. Indianapolis, we have a decent wide receiver core, right? I mean, you have other teams that you're going to be facing this season that really put a lot of focus in on the wide receiver side and the offense, and you don't do that with the defense. So what you're telling me is that you're going to go into the draft with them low value corners, and I mean that's interesting, right? That's an interesting strategy. Like I said, I think you should have just paid J.W. Hartshorn. Right now, if he wants to go off and play with a buddy of his, I guess it is what it is, but I would have made sure that I'd done everything possible to keep the guys I had. Corey Minner, another one, right? I mean, if you would have kept Minner and Hartshorn, I wouldn't even be considering you on his list right now, right? But with what's going on here and what you decided to go for, interesting moves. Interesting moves. Another team that's interesting for all the weirdest reasons is the Las Vegas Fury, right? Everybody's been talking about Denver only having 12 players, Denver only having 12 players. They're not going to have enough. They got to make a bunch of draft day trades. Las Vegas has 13. Why is nobody talking about Las Vegas? And here's the crazy thing. Las Vegas has paid $18.7 million to their 13 players. So basically what that's saying is you got $6.2 million, 6.2 and some change to fill 10 positions. Right? 6.2. I mean, let's just do the math here, right? If you're doing $6.2 million and you divide that by 10 players, I mean that's like $620,000, right? Somewhere around there, $620,000 per player. And you're going to tell me that you're going to be able to compete against a team that went to the finals 2 years in a row, and an up and coming San Diego team, and Denver, who I don't know what they're really doing, but I mean they're kind of stuck in the position they're in. You ain't competing. You're not competing. I don't know who they face this season. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's rough, right? That's a rough draw. I mean, Anthony Weil comes over at $2.6 million as a corner. Merrick Artera comes over at just over $2 million. Every player on this roster, except for Prince Wonder and Sam Yeager, are over $1 million. I mean, it's bold. Eric Price is almost $2 million. There's going to have to be some restructures. There's going to have to be. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, right? Because there's no way you're going to tell me that you're going to go into the draft. And here's the crazy thing is I don't even see them making trades. They're not even acquiring picks. So do you have people just waiting to put out their contracts? Like, what are we doing here? Right? So unless they have like 9 players in the wings waiting to sign their contracts for some odd reason, I don't see what the strategy is here. So in my mind, Justin Reside, who's been a GM for a few seasons now, what you doing, man? What you doing? The interesting part is that you make Mike Jones a free safety. You could have, I mean, Wyo and Mike Jones were teammates. You could have just switched them around, but I don't know. I mean, I've tried to wrap my head around exactly what's going on here, and I just can't. So, like I said, with $6.2 million between 10 players, you better get that number up, because I'll tell you, that's going to be rough. And then right now, you better start calling every GM in the SFL asking for trades, because it might be too little, too late. So, we are at 34 minutes right now. We're on great pace. Trying to keep this under an hour as much as I can. So let's go into the winners and losers. Right, the final Chagra. Now, some of these teams we've talked about. Some of these teams we haven't talked about. So we'll touch a little bit based on that. And hopefully you guys are enjoying this content. I'm enjoying doing it. It's weird talking to myself, but in my head I'm used to it. So I think it's okay. So let's go to team 1, right? And we're gonna do the winners. right? Let's go and do the winners first because the losers are always fun to talk about. But let's go into the winners of free agency, right? And a lot of teams are going to be looking at me going, man, why did you pick these teams, right? What did these teams do? What? I have my reasons. So number one, in no particular order, by the way, I'm going to throw that out there because as soon as I say this first team, I know that the owner's going to DM me and say, hell yeah, I was number one, blah, blah, blah. But it's got to go to San Diego, right? When you look at San Diego and what they were able to accomplish, you go and get, Bob Funk, right? Bob Funk is a guy that was in Canton last season, played really well, got a $1.231 million contract, good speed, good coverage. I mean, he's just an all-around fantastic free safety, 6'4", 220, built well, right? I mean, leave it to the San Diego Mavericks to be able to get somebody like Bob Funk. Obviously you got Cliff Allen, who is one of the better kickers in the entire SFL period. 593,000. I mean, the dudes can kick it out of the building, right? Very, very good signing. And then to top this all off, right, you're looking at this team and you're like, what they need is somebody that can pass rush, right? They need somebody that can get to the quarterback. You got Rylan Caudill, you got Bobo Caudill there, and Biff Markham, right? I don't remember who the defensive tackle was the season before. If I remember correctly, I think the Caudill boys both were there, and I think they had Eric Hammer, if I remember right, and he's retired now. But so you go out and get a guy that has been dominant the past 2 seasons when it comes to pass rush, and that's Cam Frosby from London. Obviously, with the London fold, it's benefited a lot of teams, and San Diego is one of them. I mean, Cam Frosby coming in $626,000. That's a cheap contract for a guy that has played really well the past couple of seasons and really could have demanded $1 million contract easily from other teams. But when you look at this, I mean, he's got to build his speed up a little bit, which is fine. No big deal. I mean, he's 6'4", 330. You're not going to be able to, scoop like Michael Jackson on the moonwalk with that speed. But, I mean, 85 pass rush, 84 run coverage. He can tackle really well. He's got to get his consistency up a little bit. But this is a guy that for the contract that they were able to get him at is simply phenomenal. That's a terrific signing. Anthony Anderson, another guy that benefited from the London thing, right? $412,000 coming over as a center, so he's going to be leading that offensive line. He's been really kind of on the back end for the past, few seasons, right? Paranabara, which we'll get to later. Paranabara was a guy that, has been leading that London offensive line for a while. So for him to come over and kind of be the guy, it's a great move, right? Great move for them. And then lastly, you get Rob Noel, who was a early season signing there from London as well. So a lot of London players coming over. Not surprising considering the fact that probably now officially half this roster used to wear a night uniform at one point. Which begs the question, what are they doing at quarterback, right? That's the final piece of the puzzle, is what do they do at quarterback? Right now they're sitting at $22.9 million. They got plenty of cap to sign a particular quarterback that I think would be interesting to see if he's able to come swing and play for them this season. We won't name any names, but I'm sure that if people would put 2 and 2 together, or do they just go ahead and draft for the future? Right, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. But when you look at this roster up and down, left and right, they've put it together quite well. Zach Holdorf moving over to outside linebacker was interesting, was able to probably save them money. It's a well-put team. Got to give them credit. So, and I believe they're already full, so anybody they draft is going to be free anyway. And I believe, if I remember correctly, too, there's been rumors that they've been trying to trade up. So, we'll see how that plays out. But San Diego, definitely in my eyes, a winner. Another team that really stood out to me, and I was going to bring them up in the teams that stood out, but I decided to wait for them until this time, is a team that was an expansion team in season 19 and has really been on the rise. And, they've done a lot of things to change the culture and everything that was kind of put together in season 19. No, I'm not talking about the Ramblers. The Ramblers would be an easy win in my mind, but we'll skip my team for now. I'm talking about the Seattle Nemesis. I'm telling you, they have done amazing things this season, right? I mean, obviously, when the expansion team came out, it was Ethan Kai and David Harrell, kind of an interesting pairing. But David Harrell pretty much retired off the face of the earth. They were able to bring in Pauly Truth, right? So Pauly Truth becomes an owner. Now you got Doug Day as a minority owner. And Doug is somebody that is around a lot, right? If he's not scarfing down Twinkies, he's talking to free agents. He's doing this, he's doing that. So congrats to Doug as well. I've already told him congratulations, but tell you again, buddy. But what you look at in this situation with this ball club is they're pretty well put together, right? But when you look at free agency, man, they went out and got all kinds of people, right? And maybe this is part of the reason that TJ Harper was brought in. They've done a lot of reshuffling, right? They name him like a DOC, and then I believe now he's a GM, and Doug Day was supposed to be president, and now he's a minority owner, right? So I'm not really sure exactly what the roles are, but I know that when you look at this roster, TJ Harper's hands have been getting dirty, right? Look at John Fullerton, part of the flex squad, right? You look at all these other players that they've brought in, they're guys that are probably part of the flex squad, right? And so being able to have that type of person in your organization to be able to bring these younger guys in, that's a big key. And one of the things I'll give Seattle credit for is the fact that they have, they've only won like what, 4 games, 5 in their history, and they retain every single season. They retain, right? Now, obviously, they went out and got, picking up Aaron Gooden was a good pickup, right? Sable Cannon was a very good pickup. TJ Frosty was interesting coming over from Denver. Brian James, a former Rambler, coming over, right? That was kind of a given. And then when you look at this roster with the situation they have, right? They have the number 1 overall pick. So, if you don't go quarterback there, what the hell are you doing? But I'm pretty sure that's going to be a quarterback. My guess is I'm pretty sure it's probably a certain quarterback with 4 letters in his last name and only 2 in his first name. So you can put your math together. But when you're looking at this, Baloo Scott getting paid $2.7 million for Baloo Scott, which is an interesting contract. And then you go out and you get a true number 1 wide receiver. But see, that's the thing with this team. They have not had a guy that can really come out and take the reins of a number 1 wide receiver. And Fox Highwind can do that, right? Fox Highwind's a guy that can definitely do that. So props to Fox. That's a good signing there by Seattle. Tita Queen's your number 2, Gus Scott number 3, Christian Bakagalupi. I always say that wrong. Number 4, and then John Fullerton, easy money. John Fullerton coming in at number 5. They paid their wide receivers well. They definitely paid them well. They've really just routed out this defense, right? When you look at, the back end of it, Amar Bryant Jr. was a guy that, for all purposes' sake, we were considering a number 1 if Brian James didn't want to come. And Brian James is a guy that was a number 1 overall pick. So, they've done a good job on the back end of that defense. And, they're not done. They're definitely not done, probably. So they're going to go into this draft and then have an interesting how they're going to build out the rest of their roster, right? They need some defensive linemen, right? They only got 2, so probably could see something around that area, right? 4 linebackers is kind of an interesting ordeal they got, but they got 4 good ones, right? And they're all well paid. So props to Seattle. They've done a terrific job right there. Another team that stood out, and you don't see this team making splashes in free agency, right? You don't really see it very often. But I got to give credit to the Legion. They didn't have very many holes, right? They didn't have very many holes to fill. But the ones that they did fill, they filled them with great players, right? I know for a fact that the number 1 target, I believe, of Andy Hamilton for the past 3 seasons has been Emmanuel Blackman. Emmanuel Blackman's a guy that he is just highly coveted for many, many seasons, a guy that really that was drafted by London, was groomed in London, and has had a very good career so far, being one of the premier corners in all of the SFL. And you're able to get him a $1.32 million contract. Very good signing there for them. When you look at, he's got top end speed. His coverage is pretty much up there. He's a little bit aggressive, but I think that'll be fine. Then Michael Rury's another guy that comes over from defensive tackle. He comes over from Las Vegas. Really kind of stands out as well. Really good at pass rushing and run coverage. I mean, this is a guy that will be able to make some plays there on that defensive line. Stephen McMichaels is a guy that, interesting signing there as well, coming over from Queen City. Believe he's going to be the backup. I'm not too sure. I'll have to look. And then finally, man, Per Navarra. What can you say about Per Navarra? He was one of the heart and soul of London for quite some time. Coming over, he looked like he was going to temporarily retire, ends up coming back, and he goes to an organization I think that he could really do some good deeds with, which is Vancouver. So when you're looking at the Vancouver roster, I mean, they got still a little bit more work to do. Obviously the wide receiver position, you just got Chris Curtis and Justice Blackwell. So Stephen Michaels is a number one tight end. So props to him for finding a starting job. But Christian Brown's going to need some targets. He's going to need some people to throw to. So I fully expect Vancouver to be going after somebody in the draft, looking maybe even at 2 wide receivers, right? To see exactly what they need. I mean, they got 4 corners. You got free safety. They need to get a starting strong safety as well. So there are some positions that they need to work on. Maybe they're going to get that in free agency. Maybe not. But like I said, overall with the guys that they've brought in, they've done a terrific job. I think they've really knocked that out of the park. And then obviously I've already said it like 5 times, and I'm going to be sick when I get done with this. But Minnesota once again, Minnesota's done a great job with what they've done. So and I know it's going to come back, and all I'm going to hear is, "Oh man, Chad wants to be a legend." Blah 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 blah. No, shut up, all of you darn Sasquatches. No way. I want to smell like an old hairy foot. No, but like I said, I will give props when I have to give props, and you guys get a little bit of props. So we'll definitely move on from that. Let's talk about the losers. Right. Let's talk about the losers. We'll touch on a team that I've already talked about. Actually, 2 teams I've already talked about. But Portland. I mean, once again, what are you doing, Scott Johnson? I just don't get it. Hopefully, maybe somebody will. I'll probably get a DM. I imagine somebody will probably try to explain it. And I'll probably go one ear out the other with it. But I mean, it's just until I see the build, until I see the full roster, I think it's a terrible move. I think you could have probably just put him a halfback right there along with Ezekiel Love. Could you imagine if they would have just left him at running back? And you'd have Ezekiel Love and Scott Johnson in the backfield? That'd be interesting. That would be interesting. I mean, just go ahead and embrace the power run, right? Just go ahead and embrace it. Go ahead, if you can embrace the triple option, go ahead and embrace it, right? But I'll tell you, I mean, a wide receiver that can't run routes and can't catch, and you sign him as your number 3? I don't know. Houston's another team. Like I said, I didn't really want to put Houston in the loser column, right? Because that's kind of a bad moniker for them. But they just didn't do enough, right? That's all it is. They just did not do anything. Right. Just very interesting. Very interesting. Another team, the third team that I want to bring up that we haven't really brought up a little bit, but not much is Queen City. Right. When you look at Queen City, they did 2 free agent signings. They were able to bring in Chad Stinson as an outside linebacker from LA. I believe he's going to be the defensive coordinator as well for them. So they get a new coach in this. His linebacker build is decent, right? Decent speed. He can do some coverage. He can drop back. He can tackle really well at 90 tackle. Got to build his consistency up a little bit. He's really just kind of an all-around type of build, right? 74 run cover, 69 pass rush. So he doesn't really excel at one thing, but he's kind of like meh at everything else. But the other guy that they signed was, which I really like this signing for them actually, and I kind of hope he plays well, is Brandon Ewing. Brandon Ewing is a guy that was really kind of stuck on the back end when it comes to that defense, right? He's going to come in as the number 2 corner, or actually as a number 3 corner now. So he's still down on the depth chart with Queen City. He was down on the depth chart with London being behind Tanner Hendricks and then Emmanuel Blackman, and then they were behind Emmanuel Blackman and Mike Jones, for example. So with Brandon Ewing coming in, he's got a decent build, right? When you're looking at Ewing, I mean, he's got some decent speed. He's got some really good cover skills. He's not the greatest at run coverage, right? He doesn't really cover the run real well, and he's kind of weak at the tackle a little bit. But this is somebody I think that could really improve, and hopefully maybe he can embrace the new home, or maybe this is the stepping stone to get somewhere else. I don't know, but a decent little signing. But this is where I try to figure stuff out. Right? Is obviously you have Jet Zero as your halfback. He's coming in at 1.9 million. Really kind of a power back. We've seen what Jet Zero can do, even though he hasn't really done too much in the past couple seasons. And that could be just by design. But then Tony Zoma at the other halfback is interesting. $1.6 million for Tony Zoma. He's got some darn good speed, right? 92 speed for a halfback. He's decently strong at 60, right? He can catch, he can run routes for running back, he can break some tackles a little bit. The consistency is there, right? It's just, I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting signing, right? But I feel like they could have done way more, right, than what they have right now. Right now, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 players. So they need 6 players. I know that they were able to trade out of the number 1 spot and was able to get a bunch of capital. So I think they may have what they have now, but you're at 16.3 million. But when you're looking at the team, obviously you got to go after a quarterback, right? So they're going into the draft with a quarterback, I assume. Right now, you're paying James Matthews Jr. $1.20. I'm assuming that's because you're wanting to see what the rest of the roster fills out at. You need some defensive line. You need some more wide receivers. It's like I said, I think that with what they have going on, I have to give them a little bit of a credit because at least they didn't lose like everybody. And you got some dedicated people for sure, but I feel like they could have done more, right? I feel like they could have went and got some lower end guys. They could have really brought some different situations in. GB Wallace, I think, is a good signing for them. I mean, he's not a free agent, but a good re-signing, $979,000. So the back end of that defense is getting paid a little bit, but like I said, I think they could have just done more. I think they could have done way more. And then the last team. I mean, there's really no other way to say this but Sioux Falls. I would love to be able to talk to you about Sioux Falls signings. I would love to say, yeah, it was a great signing, Julian Tyree's coming back and this and that. I can't even do that. You know why? Because nobody has re-signed. Nobody. Like, what are we doing here? Right? Is it about time that Sioux Falls just lets it go? Right? I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on. What are you waiting for? I mean, seriously, what are you waiting for? Because what the situation is that Sioux Falls has always been known as a team that does everything late, right? I mean, have they designed a stadium? Have they even talked to their players? I mean, I know I was able to get Hadrian Marlowe to come over from Sioux Falls, and he told me some interesting things, but like, I mean, what are we doing here? Right? I mean, and it's crazy because when you're a GM and everything else, and other GMs have told me the stories that when they go out and talk to these free agents, these guys that are not even signed, they're like, hey, I'm gonna commit to Sioux Falls. I'm gonna see what's happening. I'll tell you what's happening. Not a damn thing. That's what's happening. Not a damn thing is happening. Right? I mean, if I'm the league, I would be like, can you at least sign somebody so I know you're actually alive? Right? Just throw me a bone. Right? Throw a damn bone. Man, I'll tell you, because if they don't have 23, and they've already lost 2 wide receivers, Noah Tarazes and Michael Knight, and they've already, I believe they lost maybe somebody else, but they also lost Hadrian Marlowe. I mean, there's no way a free agent went there. There's no way. So you better have some draft picks, buddy. And nobody's trading with them. Because, I mean, can you even get a hold of anybody that's doing that right now? Probably not. But, man, I don't know, guys. I don't know. I think it's it's one of those things where maybe it's time to rip the Band-Aid. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be whatever, right? But it's like, come on, man. I mean, we've started re-signings 2 weeks ago, and here we are. You mean you can't tell me that you can't even sign your own player in Julian Tyree? Like, come on, come on. So I don't know what they're doing. I wish I could tell you how they've won or lost. So I'm going to put them as a loser because they haven't signed a single soul. And it's going to be interesting when signings do, come to final. And I want to see what their roster build looks like because I got to tell you, I mean, I'll give them this prop. I'll give them one thing. The ones that have been reached out to that I have heard about, they're committed. I'll give them that. I don't know why, but they are. They are definitely committed. So, all right, guys. So we are just under an hour. I want to thank you for joining today. I know I rambled on and on, hashtag rambled on and on. Maybe that's why we made the hashtag ramble on, because maybe that's why Colin did that. I'm not sure. But yeah, I had fun, right? It's a little different without Eddie, right? I don't get to banter with my Hall of Famer, and he doesn't get to tell me about how, his argument about Scar Patterson over Johnny Pickler, which is still a sham, by the way. But that's a whole other story for a whole other show. But I had fun. It was a great time. I want to thank you guys once again. First off, be sure to give a thumbs up, right? Or even if you just DM me and say, hey man, enjoyed the analysis, enjoyed whatever, right? Just let me know, right? Just let me know what you guys think, even if it's negative. I don't care. Let me know. If you haven't joined the server, the Streets of Talking, what the hell, right? I mean, I tell everybody every show, join the server, because we have a lot of fun, right? There's a lot of great conversations. There's a lot of things that are happening in that server, and we're really glad. Me and Eddie I feel like we've done something pretty special, and we're really excited about what's coming up. But I got to tell you, join the server, join the conversation. We will be live next week. We've already talked about that, so maybe we can get me and Eddie together at the same time and go over whatever. But like I said, thank you guys once again for joining. This will be on the Indianapolis Ramblers YouTube page. I know that we don't have a YouTube page for Eddie and I, but maybe someday soon, maybe someday. But I can't really just load it up for him on his Twitch. So I'll put it on mine for now. But once again, guys, thank you. And we will see you next week on The Shooter Talking. Why? Because we out. Peace.